Hello and welcome back to the Bald and Bloviating Podcast. I'm your host, Mookie Spitz, and this is part 2 of my Jewish Civil War rant. American Jewish Civil War rant, since I'm very much focused on the schism that is getting worse and worse among my fellow American Jews regarding attitudes toward Israel, the Israeli government, the Palestinians, Palestinian governments or lack thereof, the ongoing conflicts that are raging in the Middle East, our sense of identity, and our allegiance to ideology, religion, and our sense of self and history as the Middle East continues to head into uncertainty and almost certain continued and expanded warfare. In part 1, I had shared a modified stand-up routine from one of my comedy heroes, Chris Rock. And I took his Civil War among black people and I adapted it by analogy and my own cynical sense of humor to the Jewish Civil War that's raging between those who ostensibly love Israel but criticize it as they would criticize any government or entity that they disagree with, and the group of folks I call the Militant Zionists, who consider every action by the state of Israel to be a just one, and the survival of Israel to be the number one goal, regardless of impact or circumstance or strategy. And these two groups have been pitted against each other. I used the Chris Rock routine to extrapolate our own disagreements, and I had some fun with that, stirring myself and arguably a few others up in the process. Now I'd like to shift gears in part 2 to read another post that I had written in November 20 of 2023, going back about a year and a half or so. And this was entitled "A Message for American Jews from an American Jew About Israel and Hamas." The byline read, "We're losing our minds and our compassion as the world burns." Now, once again, as a kind of disclaimer, a year and a half is an eternity in current events, especially in the Middle East. Biden was, of course, still in power. The Gaza war was raging at full throttle. There were American Jewish students protesting actively on behest of the Palestinians and even Hamas in some of our major universities, while you had the opposite camp of American Jews rallying in even more stalwart, enthusiastic, zealous support of Israel and even its intensive and admittedly brutal bombing campaign and subsequent invasion of Gaza as the West Bank continued to roil in turmoil. This was before Hezbollah had been successfully neutralized. This was before the Trump administration took over and expressed its unconditional unilateral support for Israel, inclusive of recommending that the Palestinians in Gaza be exiled to build resort hotels and casinos. Really, really welcome back, Trump. And Mike Huckabee, the new ambassador, saying out loud that the West Bank just should be flat out annexed by Israel. This was also prior to the Iranians revealing weaknesses in both their offensive capacity, by sending hundreds of drones and even ballistic missiles at Israel. Israel's defensive Iron Dome doing amazing defensive work in terms of shooting down all of these missiles and drones. Only a handful getting through. And the only recorded fatality from this onslaught of Iranian missiles was, ironically enough, sadly enough, an Arab young girl. Meanwhile, Israel retaliated in the tete-a-tete, the quid pro quo, and essentially annihilated the defensive installations of much of Tehran and even some of those nuclear installations that are no doubt the next target. So the context for when I wrote this is significant, but the underlying schism remains powerful and frenetic. And the description of these two opposing camps within the Jewish community, I think, are accurate. And all of this recent transformation of the power dynamic begs the question of the intractable nature of the Israeli-Palestinian relationship, the apparent hopelessness and futility of the two-state solution, and despite what Trump has been urging or alleging, the Palestinians aren't going anywhere, the Israelis aren't going anywhere, the Jews in Israel aren't going anywhere, and war seems to be knocking at everyone's door, at least regarding Iran, as the Israeli-Saudi peace deal seems to eventually be moving forward, and on and on and on. Again, I'm focused more on the internal squabble between Jews and the United States, but again, it's within the context of this broader historical context and even the context of day-to-day broadcast news, headline news, which suggests that the stalemate between the Palestinians and the Israelis will continue. Israel, now more powerful, at least militarily than ever before, feels it's now or never. Netanyahu's survival politically depends on action escalated to Iran. And these two Jewish sides of this civil war have never been more further apart. So let's give this a whirl, see what you think, regardless which side of this American Jewish civil war you happen to be on. The magic word and intoxicating spell. An accurate stereotype of Jews the world over is that we embrace robust debate. Coming from a Talmudic tradition steeped in chavruza, we love to gather in friendly groups to analyze and argue about everything from history to politics, business to art. Diverse opinions are welcomed. Everyone is encouraged to contribute in the continuous conversation. Such a Jewish elenchus at our culture's core, one would assume that proven skills in critical thinking should apply with the utmost zeal to the subject nearest and dearest to most of our hearts, the Promised Land. Taught since birth that an event as egregious as the Holocaust could only be explained as rationale for the Zionist Aliyah, you'd think we'd welcome an open debate about Israel. Not so fast. Say the magic word Israel, and we instead lose our minds. Like a spell from Harry Potter, the incantation Yisrael makes us crazy. All you need to do is whisper these three syllables, and what began as exciting and engaging chit-chat about this or that implodes into a torrent of reflexive platitudes, revisionist history lessons, and condescending impatience. Yes, otherwise lively, spirited, open-minded, and curious people turn into tribal sociopaths and shameless boors. Once alert, spontaneous, and engaged hyper-intellectuals and bon vivants, we Jews become shambling, mumbling, brain-dead zombies. The moment Israel is heard, our eyes glaze over, our reptilian medulla takes command, we become Slytherins. The powerful magic spell instantly reveals two American Jewish subtribes at war with each other. The first is what I call the militant Zionists, who unconditionally and aggressively support everything that Israel says and does. And the second group is what I call the leftist apologists, who equally enthusiastically and irrationally criticize every move Israel makes, now to the absurd point of defending and extolling its enemies, including Hamas. The shocking attack of October 7th and its aftermath have reignited these two opposing teams of American Jews, now going mano a mano in the ring of public opinion. We are eating our own and spitting ourselves out. The polarization is so extreme and striking that all nuance in our discourse has been lost. Few American Jews able or willing to do what we do best: think. This seismic rift and its implications are painfully evident throughout our conversations with our fellow American Jews and across all social media feeds. The implications go beyond family feuds at the Sabbath table and impact everything from President Biden's approval ratings to the congressional funding of Israel and broader foreign policy decisions. Within the apparent minority of American Jews who affiliate with neither militant Zionist nor leftist apologist teams, I felt the need to message my brethren. The challenge is simple. Can all of us just stop, think, and retain the humanity, intelligence, and creativity we apply so well to everything else? Can we stop being the tools of Hamas and our enemies? Falling headlong into Hamas trap. According to Pew Research and other sources, what I characterize as militant Zionists have tended to skew older, boomers to millennials. But the data points are varied and complex and overlap across multiple demographics. Historically, a common defining characteristic of Team MZ, as I'll call them, has been political affiliation, namely right of center, until the Hamas attack. Many liberal American Jews have since joined in tossing all empathy out the window. Akin to Israel's highly fragmented society, unifying in the wake of the still incomprehensible raids, American Jews known for moderation and humanism on other issues now ignore or rationalize thousands of Palestinian casualties, most of them children, at the hands of the IDF. Lifelong liberals and diehard Democrats are not only defending every move once reviled Netanyahu makes, but interpret any criticism of Israel as anti-Semitic or pro-Hamas. The magical incantation Yisrael is now triggering rabid bloodlust in American Jews who not long ago shared BLM memes on Instagram, went to Burning Man, and hated everything MAGA. On the politically conservative side, traditional militant Zionists have never cared about the Palestinians and never will. They insist Jewish settlements in the West Bank are necessary to reclaim all that land for Israel. Gaza needs to be walled off and blockaded to contain Hamas, and periodically mowing the lawn with targeted military strikes maintains the status quo. Joined at the hip, veteran and newbie militant Zionists are in raw survival mode, justified by the ISIS-level savagery of the Al-Aqsa storm raids. They believe in a zero-sum strategy where Israel must be 100% and Palestinians de facto 0%. That translates to Hamas being destroyed in any manner the IDF sees fit. Any criticism of the IDF is automatically criticism of Israel's right to exist. These strange bedfellows of American Jewry are now high-fiving each other in synagogues and at pro-Israel marches, and watch Fox News together with rapt attention. Both politically liberal and conservative Jews are eagerly sharing TikTok music videos of the Gaza invasion, united in doxing people ripping down hostage signs and enraged at anyone demanding a ceasefire. The paradoxical irony of militant Zionist support of the IDF's military response to the raids and callous disregard of Palestinian life is Hamas' anticipation of exactly these reactions. The scope and savagery of the October 7th raids were expressly designed to trigger Israel into mercilessly bombing and then invading Gaza, which Israel has gone ahead and done. Killing, injuring, and displacing thousands of Palestinian civilians is a Hamas dream come true. The Israeli-Saudi security deal is halted. Palestinians are again global front page news. The West Bank and Lebanese border burn. Anti-Israel U.S. protests swirl around the world. And anti-Semitism flares. Militant Zionists are the unwitting allies of Hamas. Loving fascists who want to kill us. More overtly helpful to Hamas is the other end of this American Jewish irrationality and civil war. The leftist apologists, as I call them. They are, as the name implies, best characterized by their left of center politics. From Gen Z to Gen Alpha, young to old, rich to poor, they see through an equally distorted looking glass and support a theocratic mafia hell-bent on destroying Israel. Unlike liberal militant Zionists, leftist apologists remain exactly that, lefty apologists. The Palestinians in toto, another underdog cause to rally around. Equating victimhood with social injustice with systemic racism, they believe Hamas can do no wrong because they are disenfranchised poor people of color. And the Israelis, of course, are rich white people. Whispering Israel into the ears of this tribe conjures mind-boggling absurdities, such as transgendered university professors, liberal college students, and American Jewish progressives cheering Hamas and Osama bin Laden to victory. The Gaza invasion is seen as a genocide. Israel is de facto Nazi Germany, and uncompromising Islamist authoritarians are now seen as bastions of peace and love. Forgotten is how Hamas values, quote unquote, lie exactly opposite those of their American Jewish liberal supporters, who would be the first in line to be gang raped, beheaded, and burned alive should Hamas ever have power over them. So zealous is the fuming hatred of the man that entitled humanists embrace fascists simply because they are darker complexioned and play the victim. Nobody is more thrilled by this bizarro American Jewish logic than Hamas and their Iranian sponsors. The 1,200 butchered Israeli citizens are forgotten, and posters of the 240 hostages are ripped down on American city streets, sometimes by leftist apologist American Jews, whose own relatives are among the torn down faces and murdered liberal kibbutzim. Busy defending the indefensible, leftist apologists go against their own political interests too. According to 538, Biden's approval is sinking largely because younger people, the largest swath of this American Jewish subtribe, are outraged by his unequivocal support of Israel. Here they join Rashida Tlaib to ensure Trump gets a second term. While militant Zionists defend every move Israel makes in the name of self-defense, leftist apologists do the same for Israel's mortal enemies in the name of social justice. Both results are great for Hamas and Iran. More dead Palestinian children to fuel the world's anti-Israeli outrage and anti-Semitism, while liberal American Jews stab themselves in the back. The October 7th attack should never have been successful. Israel was caught off guard because Netanyahu was too busy building and defending illegal West Bank settlements and dismantling Israeli democracy. He also made a devil's bet with Hamas, hoping to pit them against the Palestinian Authority and thereby preclude a two-state solution. We all lost that bet. A modest proposal. Let's stop Jewing each other down. Despite decades of conflict and today's grim headlines, the Middle East has made progress. Realizing that negotiating with the Shia side of the Arab Street was futile, Israel, with U.S. help, signed the Abrahamic Accords with the UAE and Bahrain. Peace with the Sunnis ushered in an imminent Israeli-Saudi security deal, delayed now thanks to Hamas' unprecedented attack. Until that fateful Simchat Torah Saturday morning, Netanyahu believed that marginalizing the Palestinians was the easiest way forward. Why make any compromises at home when he could go directly to the region's Arab powers and create strategic alliances ostensibly in everyone's best interest? With Iran and Syria as common enemies, the Palestinians could simply be ignored. Surprise! Hamas Operation Al-Aqsa Storm was engineered for maximum damage. By hurling over 1,000 militants across the Gaza border and instructing them to go full ISIS, Hamas knew Israel would react as it always has, hit back 1,000 times. By relentlessly bombing Gaza, then invading, dead Palestinian kids would be live streamed, putting Hamas back on the world's map. As predictable as Israel's behavior has been, so too has American Jewry's. Militant Zionists, check, 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 check. Militant Zionists are more militant than ever before, and leftist apologists are twisting themselves into convulsive knots of logic and morality beyond comprehension. Not only are Israel and the world's Jews more hated than ever before, but American Jews are raging and fighting amongst themselves. Personally, I'm experiencing this American Jewish civil war firsthand. Recently attending Shabbat services in NYC with a friend, we saw Governor Kathy Hochul address the bereaved and freaked out Upper West Side congregation. She came across as genuinely supportive, strong, and sympathetic. She painted a stark picture of good and evil, right and wrong. Militant Zionists applauded. Leftist apologists held their tongue. One young woman in particular looked like she was about to disrupt the speech. Unable to hold two ideas in her head at the same time, the complex narrative was reduced to its own stark binary of Hamas plus Palestinian victims equal good versus this congregation plus Israeli oppressors equals bad. Neither Hamas nor the IDF want an end to the bombing and invasion because the IDF wants to kill Hamas and Hamas wants the IDF to kill as many Palestinians as possible. A similar circularity feeds our pointless and destructive American Jewish civil war, one where hysteria and intolerance from both sides have superseded our natural smarts and compassion. If nothing else, the pragmatic approach might help. Far as I can tell, both militant Zionists and leftist apologists are both doing Hamas bidding. In contrast, moderates understand that yes, Hamas must indeed be destroyed, but done so in a manner that doesn't spawn generations more terrorists. Let's work together to fix ourselves and Israel first. Maybe the world will notice. Should we give it a try? Ready? Israel. Rereading this piece that I wrote all the way back in November 2023, Ancient History at the Speed of Strife that we experience, I'm impressed by its simplicity and moved by the incontrovertible logic of it. Feedback I got after writing the piece was that I have overemphasized the role and magnitude of the militant Zionist side of the equation. I heard back from friends and family in my hometown of Skokie, Illinois, which is ground zero of American Jewry, no doubt. And they felt that I had misrepresented the Jewish zeitgeist, that most of their own friends and family, synagogue members, fellow citizens, Jew and Gentile, were a more moderate middle line between the extremes that I described. And my reaction was that I couldn't argue against their lived experience. I did emphasize that they themselves were this kind of moderate Jew that they described. And for the sake of exposition, I had deliberately polarized each of these opposing camps to their logical and inevitable extreme for the sake of this analysis and expressing my point of view about the overall conflict. But that all said, their pushback is begged by the resurgence of Donald Trump. Surprise, surprise, 45 is now 47. And as I hinted at, and in a sense predicted in this point of view and analysis, the backlash to Biden among millions of ostensibly liberal Jews was considerable and also reflective of the backlash that led to many ethnic minorities, surprisingly African American black men and Latinos, who, instead of casting their vote for a mixed race female, Kamala Harris, instead chose the 33 times indicted insurrection triggering white guy with the orange makeup and fake hair and long red tie, with his Muslim ban, with his some of them are good people, with his full page advertisement in the New York Times or one of the other papers to execute who proved to be falsely accused African American men for murder in a contentious case, even at that time. The same guy who rose to prominence with the Obama birther myth, that guy. And if nothing else, it illustrates the power of this militant Zionist sensibility of gravitating toward the strong man, the perceived strong man in a time of crisis for a sense of security and for a sense of hoping for a more stable but also a more prosperous future. Now, that's been slapped in the face by Trump slapping on these tariffs, catching everyone off guard. I don't think anyone anticipated the magnitude, randomness of these tariffs and their impact already to the economy. But despite all that, one thing remains certain is Trump's unilateral and unconditional support of Israel. As I mentioned in part one, I feel that war against Iran is inevitable and perhaps even imminent. Now, I was wrong about Trump's ascendance. I, like James Carville, the Democrat strategist, was naive about my feelings that the American people simply couldn't accept another round of the Trump. And I could very well be wrong, and I hope I'm wrong that the current Gaza conflict and smoldering South Lebanon conflict and active American tank attacks against the Houthis in Yemen, I hope I'm wrong that it will escalate to bombing Iran's nuclear sites, which could very well precipitate a broader war. I hope I'm wrong about that. But the trends seem to drive it in that direction. And then flipping the camera back to American Jewry, I see American Jews equally split. Although, again, as I mentioned in part one, the leftist apologist is suffering the same fate as the entire Democrat Party, which is frustration, disbelief, disarray, and almost a sense of fatalism that nothing really can be done to face this juggernaut of Doge governmental slashing, attacks against the judiciary, the deportation of people without due process, the renormalization of relations with Russia, throwing the Ukraine, EU, and NATO under the bus, ridiculous tariffs against China to the point the Walmart CEO was telling Trump himself that his shelves are going to be empty in a few months. The list goes on and on, But the unwavering support of a huge percentage of the American Jewish community for Trump is centered around this obsession that I outlined in this point of view and analysis about Israel being the single issue vote, the obsessive single issue vote. Everything Israel does is the right move to make. Israel is beyond any kind of rebuke. Netanyahu might be an asshole, but he's the asshole Israel needs to survive and flourish among the animals of the jungle. And as I mentioned, their mirror image, the leftist apologist, continues to support the Palestinians in a way that appears by any stretch of the imagination to be self-incriminatory and almost perverse in terms of the inverted value system that makes liberals liberals. But the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And people are upset. And Jewish families continue to argue at the Passover table. So, what's the way out of this mess? I don't think there is one. As American politics continues to polarize and vacillate, we're reaching a point where the traditional ways of doing business and politicking and doing foreign policy are being shattered. Despite Trump being in control, and despite this unilateral and unconditional support of Israel, all the data reveals that that's not going to last. The second the administration flips into even a moderate Democrat stance, millions of American voters are increasingly skeptical about what has been considered this a priori legacy view of America's relationship and support of Israel. And I don't say that as the black sheep of the tribe here, as the bad son of the Passover table. I say that looking at the data, looking at the numbers, it's unsustainable. And we can oscillate and flip flop between polarized extremes from Bush to Obama and Obama to Trump and Trump to Biden, then back to Trump. But the net effect of all of this is an increasing and progressively worsening loss of support for Israel. And you can say, and you'll be right, that Jews are right, that most of the world hates Israel and hates the Jews for that matter. But the situation certainly is not improving with the continued conditions in Gaza and the West Bank, regardless of the history and regardless of whose finger can point to whom to blame. And that will be even further exacerbated if Iran burns and then retaliates and the price of oil literally doubles within a destabilized, uncertain global economy, ratcheted by these insane, random, and fluctuating tariffs. So there you have it. Uncertainty, continued conflict, and an intractable conflict between the Palestinians and the Jews of Israel now and into the indefinite chaotic future. Who knows? Maybe aliens will try to stake the claim. And like the film District 9, where white people and black people forget about apartheid and post-apartheid conditions in Johannesburg because you might be white or black, but you at least don't look like a giant shrimp alien. Maybe only then will peace descend on the Middle East. I don't know. I always scoff at this clusterfuck. Look at a heavily tanned Jewish Israeli person. Compare him or her to a darker complexioned Palestinian person in Israel. Compare the food that they eat. What the hell is an Israeli salad? Is that cultural appropriation or an homage to what the Palestinians themselves are eating? What's the difference? Falafel, hummus, pita bread, the shawarmas of Lebanon. The food is wonderful throughout the Mediterranean. And yet, the differences can never be greater and are only worsening. The human condition. I'm tempted to make more concrete predictions, but I figure it's shameful to do so while so many continue to suffer and so much of the world hangs in the balance. But either way, thanks for listening. I hope that this was enlightening. I welcome feedback, as I had gotten earlier from the blog post itself. And if I could leave one quick postscript to my own people, the American Jews, the Jewish Americans, I just wish that we can recapture our curiosity and love of a good debate, because most of those conversations and those connections, at least in this arena, have stopped. Thanks for listening to the Bald and Bloviating podcast. Like, share, comment, and very much more to come.